After the Enclave's destruction, the refugees of Arroyo and Vault 13 resettled, building a new community with the aid of the Garden of Eden creation kit. Finding themselves hundreds of miles from their vault, the members of Vault 13 chose to join the villagers in establishing a new community, and their technical expertise, combined with the villagers' survival skills, allowed the new settlement to grow and prosper. 2 generations of the same bloodline were reunited, and their savior, the Chosen One, became elder, presiding over the village in the years to come. Arroyo's elder lived for many years after the destruction of the Enclave. She was pleased that the ancient separation between Vault 13 and the Vault Dweller had been reconciled, and many were the times she told you that she wished the Vault Dweller were alive to have seen the reconciliation take place. The elder passed away in her sleep, certain that the safety of your new village had been secured and was now flourishing. Many of the older Arroyo residents believe that she now lives in the vault of the sky, telling the Vault Dwellers of your brave deeds. Armed with flares and clubs, the people of Modoc invaded the Slag's underground city. The Slags were quickly defeated, and the Modoc residents slaughtered every man, woman, and child they found. Rumor of this vicious attack spread far and wide, and fear motivated Modoc's neighbors to attack and destroy the town. Relations between the Slags and the residents of Modoc flourished. Between the two peoples, Modoc prospered and became a major farming community, supplying all the outlying regions with food. The extermination of the Slags only created new problems for Modoc. Unable to find the Slags' underground cistern to sustain the crops, Modoc was hit hard by the resultant drought. Over the next several years, the people of Modoc either moved away or died of starvation. Without any viable economy, the den soon vanished into the wasteland. With Metzger gone, slavery disappeared from the area. Becky's casino bar grew quickly, and Rebecca Dyer's reputation as an honest casino and bar owner brought her the business needed to buy out her competition and expand. The den flourished, and it soon gained a reputation for being a tough but honest community. Metzger's business in the slave trade soon faded with the removal of the Mordino family. The den continued to attract criminals, and Metzger's business practices delved further into drugs and prostitution. The den soon became a rallying point and a safe haven for raiders. Metzger's slave trade in the den expanded greatly, giving him influence and power throughout most of the area. Breeding pens were started, and eventually, no one was safe from the threat of being enslaved. Travelers avoided the den, hearing of the evils committed within its walls. Over the next few years, the background radiation from Gecko's power plant began to cause mutations in the Vault City population, forcing the citizens to relocate to NCR. NCR, however, recalling past animosity, relegated the Vault City refugees to the status of second-class citizens. The correspondence between NCR and Vault City continued, and a few years after the destruction of the Enclave, Roger Weston assumed the head of the NCR Council. He immediately set limits for NCR's expansion north, and in a landmark settlement, passed an amendment that formally recognized Vault City's independence. Shortly after this settlement, Weston suffered a heart attack and retired from politics. He moved north to Vault City for medical treatment and eventually married Joanne Lynette in the following year. In the years to come, Vault City suffered greatly from raider attacks. Eventually, the situation grew so desperate, the citizens were forced to request aid from NCR. Within a month, a large detachment of the NCR's military was stationed in Vault City. The military presence quickly became an occupation force, and Vault City became the first of NCR's border territories. In the years following the destruction of the Enclave, Vault City continued to stagnate, choking on its own isolationism. Its Volt 8 generator, which was never intended to support such a large population, prevented Vault City's necessary expansion. Eventually, the city was absorbed by NCR, which had spread steadily northward since its founding. The slaughter of Vault City has become the stuff of legend. One day it was a thriving community, and the next, the body of its citizens lay strewn throughout the streets. It looked as if raiders had sacked the city, but no bodies of the attackers were ever found. Their vault was plundered of all its technology, and refugees from Gecko soon moved into the broken walls of the city. The slaughter of Vault City has become the stuff of legend. One day it was a thriving community, and the next, the body of its citizens lay strewn throughout the streets. It looked as if raiders had sacked the city, but no bodies of the attackers were ever found. Their vault was plundered of all its technology, and the inhabitants of Gecko soon moved into the broken walls of the city. In a few short months, they had rebuilt the city and restored much of the systems that had been damaged by the raiders. The Gecko reactor meltdown had terrible consequences for the region. The resultant radioactivity and heat emanating from the reactor killed every living creature within a 10-kilometer radius and poisoned the area for years to come. Vault City's perceived threat from the peaceful ghouls of Gecko was at an end. Repairing Gecko's power plant prevented any further radioactivity from leaking into Vault City's groundwater. Though this eased tensions between the two communities, they still maintain an uneasy truce. Optimizing Gecko's reactor created a power surplus in Gecko. The Vault City Council, unable to expand because of their limited power supply, yielded to internal pressure and was forced to take over Gecko to control the reactor. The peaceful ghouls of Gecko became slaves and spent the rest of their lives serving Vault City. Optimizing Gecko's power plant became the first step in forging a spirit of cooperation between Gecko and Vault City. Gecko's increased power production became instrumental in helping Vault City's expansion. The harsh xenophobia of many of Vault City's leaders faded into obscurity, while ghoul and human labored side by side to create a center of learning and tolerance where once had stood only enmity and distrust. Eventually, the citizens of Vault City tired of having their groundwater radiated by the ghouls' leaking atomic reactor in Gecko. In a wave of xenophobic fear and hatred, the well-armed soldiers of Vault City slaughtered the peaceful ghouls and shut down the reactor for good. Unable to harness any additional sources of power, Vault City eventually stagnated and died, itself a victim of its own hatred. You still hear mention of Harold from time to time. Apparently, the tree growing from his head has gotten larger, and if rumors are to be believed, fruit is growing from it. The seeds are said to be remarkably tough, and several of them have taken root even in the most barren stretches of the wasteland. The inhabitants of New Reno were slaughtered, and the city collapsed into ruin. No lights shine there now. The streets, home only to packs of wild dogs and vultures. The desert tribes avoid the giant graveyard, claiming the city is haunted by evil spirits. Some say the destruction of New Reno was a judgment from a higher power. In the years following the destruction of the Enclave, a new family arose in New Reno, following the example of a simple tribal that had once visited their city. They were few in number, but surprisingly resourceful. Driven by religious fervor, they took control of New Reno and put the other families to the spear. After their victory, they sent out many messengers across Northern California, looking for their founder, without success. Many felt that the founder had been taken by the fortune spirits and now dwelled in a golden casino paradise in the sky. Not long after the destruction of the Enclave, the Bishop family of New Reno was blessed with a child. This child seemed to have little in common with the bishops, preferring instead to spend his days exploring the wastes. When he turned 13, he seized control of the Bishop family and led them to victory over the remaining New Reno families. He died quietly in his sleep at the age of 73, never having known his real father. The Bishop family of New Reno rose to prominence over the next few years, forming a strong political alliance with the new California Republic and Vault City. Many mysterious deaths and closed-door proceedings surrounded the formation of the alliance. But in the end, New Reno became part of the civilized world. The other families were soon absorbed, and New Reno became a prime tourist location for the new republic. In the decades after the alliance, several bishops rose to political power and were instrumental in the passage of several amendments protecting gambling rights and prostitution. The Salvatore family of New Reno, having profited from their ties to Navarro, used their laser weaponry to burn the other families into submission. The resultant massacre was dubbed Ash Friday and is still celebrated in New Reno to this day. The Modino family grew greatly in power as Jet's influence spread across Northern California. Within a year, they had seized control of New Reno and expanded their empire, absorbing the Den and other surrounding areas. There was little violence in the conquest, as Jet had weakened all resistance to Modino rule. With their jet production halted with the discovery of a cure, the Modino family quickly lost ground in New Reno and were absorbed by the other families. Most became enforcers or slaves, and the name Modino was soon forgotten. Less than a month after the Enclave's destruction, a mob war broke out in New Reno streets. The Rights, armed with an arsenal of weaponry that dated back to the pre-war years, leveled the casinos of the other families with rocket launchers. The mob war was clocked as lasting a little over 43 minutes, and when the smoke cleared, half of New Reno had been demolished. To this day, it is commonly taught that the Wright family were the founders of New Reno. Within months after the Enclave's destruction, war broke out in New Reno streets. The Wrights, believing the Mordinos responsible for the death of one of their family, attacked the Desperado Casino. The running gun battle that ensued lasted little more than a day, and the Wrights were massacred to the last woman and child. Their mansion lies vacant now, and there are few New Reno inhabitants who remembered who once lived there. Within a year of the Enclave's destruction, the Wright family turned from criminal activity to legitimate pursuits. Several schools and churches were established in New Reno, along with a law enforcement body that crippled the influence of the families. Though New Reno lost much of its edge, the city obtained a certain solidity that appealed to newcomers. Many came to Reno not to visit, but to live, and the population increased threefold. Today, the test scores of New Reno high school graduates are greater than many Californian schools before the war. Though the Wright family never completely recovered from Richard's death, the knowledge that their killer had been brought to justice eased their troubled sleep. Though a murderer had been found and punished, the true identity of the man who had killed Mr. Wright's son was never discovered. The murder was never spoken of again, and became a closed chapter in the Wright family history. Myron died less than a year after the defeat of the Enclave, stabbed by a jet addict while drinking in the den. His discovery of jet was quickly forgotten, and now there is no one who remembers his name. After Doc Johnson helped treat the miners during the Great Jet Scare, the citizens of Vault City voted Doc Johnson into the mayor's seat. Under the doctor's patient hand, Redding forged closer ties with Vault City until, some years later, Vault City annexed Redding, granting Vault City's citizenship to only 10% of Redding's population. Several years after the Chosen One sold the excavator chip to dangerous Dan McGrew, Dan used the superior production of his Morning Star mine to buy the Cocoweef mine and then to reopen the great Winnemingo mine. Dan then used his industrial clout to forge an alliance of convenience with the families of New Reno, trading gold in return for protection. Several years after buying the excavator chip from the Chosen One, Marge LaBarge was able to purchase and control both the Morning Star and the newly opened Cocoweef mines. Marge was an easy choice for mayor, and using her new political power, she made Redding join the growing New California Republic in return for a seat in the NCR's Hall of Congress. The gold-producing town of Redding soon found itself in the unenviable position of a scrap of meat being torn by 3 jealous vultures. Sooner than many would have expected, there was nothing left of the scrap that was once Redding. For Vault City, New Reno, and the New California Republic had laid waste to what was once an area of plenty. Nothing now exists but the desiccated husk of what was once Redding. The destruction of the mutants ensured the death of the town. Without their strength and ability to withstand the toxins within the mine, the valuable ore proved unattainable. Those who caused this destruction rejoiced at first, until they realized the foolishness of what they had done. They struggled to keep the community flourishing, but to no avail. The winds and the waste scoured Broken Hills from the map. With the destruction of the conspiracy to destroy the mutants, Broken Hills began to thrive. Then the uranium ran out. The city, having lost its sole reason for existing, slowly dispersed. The residents carried their riches with them, leaving the place a windswept, desolate ghost town. A few holdouts remained, attempting to eke out a pathetic existence, but eventually, they too disappeared. Shortly after your last departure, the powder keg of racial tension in Broken Hills exploded. Racist humans fought against mutants, ghouls, and humans who sided with the mutants. The few survivors of the battle destroyed the mine, ensuring no one else could profit by it, and disappeared into the wastes. Inspired by your example, Marcus eventually traveled across the Great Mountains to the east, searching for other refugees from the Master's army. You never heard from him again. Your help with Vault 15 launched the New California Republic's push to civilize its neighbors. Though there were many more obstacles to overcome, the NCR now had a foothold into the northern wastes. The failure of diplomacy at Vault 15 slowed the New California Republic's growth into the north. Embarrassed by the failure, President Tandy was replaced by Roger Weston. When the new government finally returned to Vault 15, they found nothing but a ghost town. Already weakened by the failure to annex Vault 15, President Tandy was forced to retire when her own Vice President Carlson accused her of complicity in Councilman Weston's death. As president, Carlson wasted no time in securing his grip on power. Under his rule, expansion slowed, since he was more concerned about lining his own pockets than furthering the cause of civilization. Shaken by the assassination of Vice President Carlson, right-wing elements seized control of Congress and set the new California Republic on a path to military rule. Eventually, the survivors of the enclave found a new home in the ranks of the NCR. With the support of the new California Republic, the Vault 15 squatters soon became self-sufficient and productive members of society. The squatters of Vault 15 continued their meaningless, non-productive lives. No one noticed when the desert wastes finally claimed the squat. With your aid, the Death Claws of Vault 13 became a thriving community. When the Vault could no longer hold their numbers, a peaceful campaign of expansion was launched to claim the surrounding lands. By eliminating the Death Claws of Vault 13, you banished yet another species of the realms of extinction, proving once again that genocide is a viable solution to any problem. The Shi, demoralized and leaderless after your rampage through their town, slowly drifted apart. They blended into other towns, hoping to find a place free from the depredations of killers. The strain of plant the scientists were growing mutated, gaining a measure of sentience. It killed the laboratory technicians and took over the laboratory in which it was first conceived. It took a massive concentration of resources to crush the being, and this left the Shi poverty-stricken. They disappeared into the wastes. The Shi flourished, creating a botanical scourge on the radiation surrounding their beloved town. Though this vine could not grow in other soils, the Shi took care to nourish it in their lands. They continued to grow in strength and prominence, forming the basis of a new empire. The scientists grew tired of waiting for the Starfather to come for them or provide the fuel they needed. Using a cheap derivative fuel, they launched an abortive effort to reach the stars themselves. Their shuttle exploded moments after takeoff. The scientists, unable to figure out how to create an airtight seal on their ship, went ahead and launched it anyway, believing that the Starfather would protect them once they left Earth's atmosphere. They perished in orbit. The scientists ensured a safe and speedy launch of the Quetzal. Unfortunately, they didn't account for having recycled air aboard their ship, and they perished in orbit. As for the tanker vagrants, well, as vagrants do, they drifted on. The destruction of the Enclave erased all trace of President Richardson from history. Now the title of president is used simply as a boogeyman to frighten children.